Games of all kinds play a large part in our development as human beings, both individually and as a society. Games help us develop cooperative relationships, physical skills, and strategic ability. They also provide playful relief from some of life's harsh experiences. But games aren't limited to screen sports or board games. Sometimes we have game-like experiences in our real lives. When game-like features, such as scoring systems, are built into ordinary activities, we can call this process gamification. If you've ever used a competitive step counter or Pomodoro timer, you might have experienced what the philosopher Thi Nguyen calls intentional gamification. In intentional gamification, we use design elements of games with the explicit goal to change or strengthen our motivations. Other times we might experience what Nguyen calls accidental gamification. The academic progress and success of students, for instance, is made quantifiable by the introduction of a grading system. The primary intention behind such a system is not to gamify studying. It's merely a bureaucratic attempt to make educational achievements more tractable and objectively comparable. As a byproduct, though, it forces game-like motivations onto students. Gamification, intentional or not, can produce good results, but it also comes with risks and unique dangers. Nguyen argues that gamification can make us simplify our values and goals in potentially problematic ways. Let's return to the example of a step counter. Suppose that you become convinced that you should walk more for your health. To encourage yourself to do so, you get an app that lets you compete against your friends, awarding virtual ribbons and medals to the person with the most steps for the day or week. Although in the example you chose to use a step counting app to encourage you to walk more for your health, real-life motivations are much more complex. Improving your health is only one motivation among many for walking more every day. You might want to spend time in nature or your community, to meditate, or simply be happier. To complicate things further, people have many different reasons for pursuing health. Perhaps they want to live a longer life or spend more time with their loved ones. Or perhaps they believe pursuing health is a morally good thing to do. When you use the app and competing with your friends, these complex values and desires don't come into play. You don't get virtual ribbons for spending more time with your loved ones, or for actually being healthier. You get virtual ribbons and medals simply for taking more steps than your friends. It's no accident that successful gamification offers us a simple path to success. In games, we can easily measure and score our performance to determine whether we're successful or win the game. Real-life values are often complex, unquantifiable, and incommensurable, meaning that they cannot directly be measured against one another. Part of the appeal of games is precisely that game values are often the exact opposite. They provide us with simplified values that allow us to know exactly how to achieve the best in-game results. What gamification does is to allow us to import these simplified values to our everyday lives. The philosopher Thi Nguyen calls this value clarity. Value clarity can be good. It can help us single-mindedly pursue our goals, and that way we can be as efficient as possible. But unfortunately, it can also make us neglect unquantifiable values that are very important to us. Suppose you've been using your step counting app for a while now. You've been neck on neck with a friend of yours. While sitting out for dinner at a restaurant with your family, you get a notification that your friend has pulled ahead for the day, beating your current step count by 200 steps. So of course, you discreetly excuse yourself and walk to the restroom, where you walk up and down the hallway until you're 200 steps ahead of your friend. Well, you might win the step counting competition, but it seems that something's gone wrong in your use of the game. You're now further away from your goals that made you use the app in the first place, such as being able to spend more time with your loved ones or being more mindful. Nguyen calls this kind of experience value capture. Value capture occurs when we start out with our rich and complex values, and then encounter simplified and often quantifiable versions of these values. Our original values are then replaced by these simplified values that are easier to follow, making us worse overall in the process. Now, most game players know that most of the elements of the game they play are fictional. You'd be quite surprised if a Monopoly player, after buying the Boardwalk property, attempted to claim such a property in real life. But the ways that games offer simplified values is much more subtle, and it can be difficult to spot when these values spill over into our real lives. Even if we don't know which actions in our real lives make us happier, we likely know which actions might increase our step counts, bolster our employer reviews, or increase our profits. And all of these are commonly gamified today. The simplicity of values and the ease of choice is what makes the replacement of values and value capture so tempting. The effects of value capture are far-reaching in our individual lives, but these effects reach even farther still. Value capture can also affect the way we interact with others. Even if two people start out with the same rich, complex values, they might come to accept different simplified versions of these values that then conflict with one another. You and your friend might have started out both valuing physical health, mental health, and time with loved ones. But if you're both drawn to single-mindedly pursue simplified versions of these values, you can find your values driving you further apart rather than bringing you together. For example, you might keep on counting your steps while your friend decides to start counting their swim laps. Superficially, it now looks like you and your friend value different things. Your goal is to walk as much as possible, while your friend seems to think swimming is more important. Like all play, gamification requires that we recognize the limits of the game and its goals. A mature game player must recognize when these simplified games and the values involved are appropriate and when they should be discarded. But recognizing what needs to be done is easier than figuring out how to do it. How can we know which game elements to leave behind, and how can we actually do so? And while we figure that out, how can we look past the simplified values we've been seduced into accepting in order to recognize the complex values that we share? This has been a product of the Conceptual Foundations of Conflict project. If you enjoyed this video or would like to learn more, please follow us on YouTube and check out the project website at conflict.philosophy.academy.